As we have been learning in class, the 15th through the 17th centuries were known as the Age of Discovery, and major European countries were in competition to extend their power into North America and claim the land as their own. This video will examine which regions were explored by Portugal, France, Spain, and England, beginning with the earliest. Portugal led the way in the exploration of new lands. As we discussed in class, Portuguese exploration activities during this time were focused on Africa, with the goal of reaching Asia by sailing around the continent. These efforts were manned by Prince Henry the Navigator. Over the course of 12 years, Prince Henry sent 14 expeditions with the goal of making it around the southern tip of Africa. Though he didn't have success in finding his way to Asia, Prince Henry did make his way down the coast of Africa, setting up forts and creating a successful gold and slave trade. Eventually, other Portuguese explorers did find their way to Asia, and other expeditions saw the Portuguese find Brazil quite by accident. This accident proved to be a happy mistake, as Brazil became the most profitable colony for the small European nation. Portugal clearly lit the flame of exploration around Europe, and now we turn to England, and notably for us, John Cabot. Though John Cabot was known as an English explorer, he was actually born Giovanni Caboto. Because of the record-keeping practices of the era, no specifics are known, but it is likely he was born in 1455 in Genoa, Italy. He was a merchant in Venice before moving to Spain with his wife and sons in 1490. The purpose of this move was to seek financing for a voyage to Asia. However, his request was denied because of the Spanish crown's loyalty to Christopher Columbus. Cabot repeated his request in Portugal, where he was also denied, leading him to Bristol, England. It is important to note that Cabot was different from his peers in that his motivations for exploration were focused solely on riches and control of trade routes. There was no religious fervor involved. In the end, his journey to England proved a success, and in 1496, King Henry VII provided Cabot with permission for his exploration. Incidentally, there were political skirmishes with the Spanish and the Pope over England's entry into the Americas, but it seems not to have made much of an impact on Cabot. At any rate, Cabot's goal was to reach Asia by sailing west. Cabot's first voyage failed. Lack of supplies, weather, and disagreements with his crew, all things we discussed as potential obstacles to exploration, forced him to turn back without having reached North America. He tried again in 1497. This journey took Cabot and his crew south of Ireland, and very soon after his departure saw him landing on what was probably the coast of Newfoundland. Cabot, of course, thought he had found Asia, and interestingly, this is the second person to provide details about the Americas, Columbus being the first. During this voyage, Cabot explored the shores of Canada and Newfoundland, allowing England to claim this land, but there was no official recording or log of his discoveries. Cabot struck out once more in 1498, this time with a larger fleet and more men. However, this expedition disappeared without a trace, and nothing was heard from him again. Spain joins the exploration frenzy next as we move into the 1500s. We will look specifically at Francisco Vasquez de Coronado, who was born in 1510 in Burgos, Spain. His early history is unknown, but indications are that the Vasquez family may have been part of the Spanish nobility, and that Francisco was certainly well educated. He arrived in New Spain, which are the lands previously conquered by Spain, mainly Mexico and Central America, in 1535. A few years later, after hearing fantastical tales of a place filled with gold, silver, and other riches, known as the Seven Cities of Cibola, it was decided by the powers that be that Coronado should lead an expedition to explore and conquer these lands that contained such riches. So off Coronado went, with Spanish soldiers in tow. Through battles and violent clashes with the natives, Coronado conquered more lands in the southwestern part of the United States, all the while noting that none of the towns conquered contained the infamous riches described by the stories that were told. Various expeditions led Coronado as far north and east as modern-day Great Bend, Kansas. In total, the lands conquered by Coronado and claimed for Spain included not only parts of Kansas, but also modern-day New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, as well as the Grand Canyon and the Colorado Plateau. As with Columbus before him, Coronado was accused of being a barbaric leader and was tried by the Spanish government on those charges, but, not surprisingly, was found not guilty. He remained in Mexico in a diminished governmental position for the remainder of his life, dying there in 1556. Finally, in the late 1500s and early 1600s, we see France enter the Age of Discovery. Samuel de Champlain was born in 1570 in southwestern France. Early travels with family members gave de Champlain the insight into other countries' efforts at colonization, and provided him with the opportunity to study the way other colonies were handled. On his later travels, which will be outlined here, de Champlain used this knowledge as what not to do to native peoples in a new land. In 1603, Samuel de Champlain journeyed to and mapped the St. Lawrence River. Though there had been previous expeditions to this area by France, Samuel found the lands to be deserted. A year later, he sailed with the goal of creating a French settlement in a place now called Acadia. He landed in Nova Scotia, where he chartered the harbors there. It was during this time period that de Champlain made several journeys from Nova Scotia along the coast of Maine, where he discovered and named the islands there. He also explored most of modern-day New England, where he established a colony called Port Royal. This remained de Champlain's base until 1607. He tried a few other expeditions in the New England area, but they were unsuccessful because of weather, shipwreck, and trouble with the natives. Eventually, de Champlain sailed the St. Lawrence River again, landing on the Rock of Quebec. This was in July of about 1608. Harsh winters and trouble maintaining the claim on this land because of clashes with natives and locals, the colonization efforts took many years. Even then, the French hold on Quebec was tenuous. Between 1609 and 1613, Samuel de Champlain made several journeys back and forth to France in efforts to gain support for the colonization efforts, as well as further journeys to other parts of Canada. It was on these journeys that he found and charted Montreal and Ottawa. The next 2 years would see de Champlain make even more expeditions, leading to the discovery of Lake Nipissing, the French River, Lake Ontario, and Lake Huron. In 1628, Quebec came under attack by the English, and eventually the French had to cede control. Fortunately for Quebec and the French, peace treaty provisions returned control of Quebec and Canada back over to France. With Quebec back in the hands of France, Samuel de Champlain spent the rest of his years repairing the damage from the war with the British, as well as fortifying the settlement against future attacks. He died on Christmas Day, 1635. Samuel de Champlain wasn't the only explorer to put his fingerprints on North America in the name of France. Born in 1643 in Rouen, France, as René Robert Cavelier, Robert La Salle also provided France with lands in North America. He became an explorer after giving up on training to become a priest. He was an extremely ambitious man, always on the hunt for more in the way of control of the fur trade. His first journey began in 1669. However, La Salle had no experience and relied on others to assist him. His relationships with this crew were tense, and when he became ill at Burlington Bay, Robert La Salle split from the crew and went out on his own, eventually exploring the Ohio River. Though the details of this first journey are vague at best, it was determined that he did not make it as far as the Mississippi River, which was discovered by other Frenchmen. Further, it is known that La Salle returned to New France in 1673. His second journey was no less fraught with disaster. Once La Salle had gained backing and commissioned to explore North America between New France and Mexico, he took off in his brand new ship, only to get as far as what we now know as Green Bay, Wisconsin, before he had to send the ship back as it was laden with furs. He continued his voyage in canoes and made it to present-day Peoria, Illinois. Eventually, La Salle began to explore the previously discovered Mississippi River. His journey took him all the way to the mouth of the river, and he stopped to set up forts all along the way. Following his journey, La Salle returned to France in an effort to get more money for further exploration of this area. Having received the desired permission and funds, La Salle began his journey back to the Americas. However, this journey was a string of disasters, from pirates to disease to La Salle missing the mouth of the Mississippi altogether. Landing in Texas, and now without any ships, La Salle's luck further declined, and he was eventually shot and killed by conspirators from his crew in March of 1687. Despite his hard luck and seemingly fruitless expeditions, La Salle's journeys down the Mississippi secured this area for France, as well as created several forts for the country. It's clear that the many journeys of these countries and their brave explorers helped to shape the world we live in today. None of the journeys were without issue, and there were pros and cons to each, which we will discover in our next video. Now it's time to take a look in Google Classroom and complete the Google form, as well as your mapping booklet.